Welcome to a new episode of the Straight Wrestling Voices of the Indies podcast. I'm your host Monroe, and as always, with me, everyone's favorite US independent wrestling fan, Sebastian.
Thank you as always for the introduction, Monroe, and welcome to this week's episode of Straight Wrestling Voices of the Indies. And there are so many things that I can say about today's guest. He is the founder, the promoter, the head trainer of TWE. He is the former winner of the Scenic City Invitational. He has been active for so many promotions. He has been a part of multiple WXW Festival weekends. He has been a part of the Wrestlemania Indie Weekend. He has been a part of the Festival and many promotions more. And therefore, we are really happy to have him as our guest today. And with that, welcome. And thank you very much for taking the time to be our guest today, Jaden Newman.
Wow, that's a hell of an intro there. I was sitting there listening. I was counting. I was like, I didn't think that I had done that much stuff. But wow, that's crazy. And you got it absolutely correct. Sebastian is absolutely everybody's favorite American fan over here. Like everybody loves Sebastian here in the States.
For the people who don't know who you are, who is Jaden Newman?
Who is Jaden Newman? Well, some days I'm still trying to figure that out. But Jaden Newman, as a professional wrestler, is someone who has been actively performing now for 10 years. I am 25 years old, based out of Chattanooga, Tennessee, here in the United States. And I've been going strong ever since I started. I started at a young age, 15, and not slowed down since.
Can you tell us how do you get into wrestling as a fan and also what fascinates you about wrestling?
Of course. So whenever I was younger, I first got into professional wrestling probably around the age of 7 or 8. And that, of course, is like a crucial age time for when you're trying to figure out what you're interested in. And I wasn't really sure at that time what it was exactly, but thankfully my grandfather, who is my biggest supporter, the guy that actually started TWE here, he would take me to the flea markets on the weekend. And one day we were walking through and we stumbled across the pro wrestling booth. And they had a deal going. It was it was like $5 for $5 for 5 DVDs. And in that stack of DVDs that I bought was Rey Mysterio's Master of the 619 WWE home video. It was like the first one they released of him. And it was a documentary on his life. And it also featured some of his matches. So I watched the whole thing, and I found the match of Rey Mysterio versus Eddie Guerrero from Halloween Havoc 97. And from that moment on, I was just hooked, which kind of leads me into what fascinates me about professional wrestling. And that is simply that it can be absolutely anything. It's superheroes come to life. It's real life. It's real life scenarios put on display. It's a reflection of us, but it's whatever you want it to be. That's what fascinates me about professional wrestling.
Who trained you and who was the biggest influence on you starting as a wrestler?
All right. So who originally trained me was a gentleman out of Ringgold, Georgia. I won't name him, but who I credit as my trainer is Kerry Awful and Nick Iggy of the Carnies. They were a pretty big tag team over here in the United States and are still an active tag team. But they were the ones that trained me. I remember we would train every single Thursday. It was called Throw Up Thursdays before we ended up actually naming the school proper. And it would be me and 2 others with Carrie and Nick, and Kevin Koo would also be at these sessions. And that was essentially who I credit as my trainers. And you asked, the other question was who were my influences, correct?
Yes.
Awesome. So I just wanted to make sure. Sometimes I'll go on tangents, and if I do, please stop me. So my biggest influences in professional wrestling, obviously, I feel shift, right? Especially with the years that passed and whatnot. One of my biggest influences in professional wrestling growing up was Rey Mysterio and Jeff Hardy. because, they were just so eye-catching and just so inspiring, and just free-spirited. But now, as far as like inspirations of what influences like me as a professional wrestler, I would have to say that Chris Hero is probably my number one. Chris Hero, Bryan Danielson, CM Punk. Those are some of the biggest influences I currently have right now.
You are only 25 years old and you have already been wrestling for over 10 years. How was the experience to start wrestling at such a young age?
It was a hassle. Starting wrestling at 15, beginning training at 14, I was a freshman in high school. So like I basically wrestled my whole like tenure or whatnot of high school. So balancing like school and like also like performing on the weekends, making time to train. It was not easy by any means. And it was not something that was necessarily as accepted maybe as it would be now, especially for a lot of the younger wrestlers getting in the game and like the experiences that I've talked about with like them, for instance. I dealt with bullying and such growing up and like getting into wrestling. And then, of course, like up to the point to whenever I actually got into the sport. So it was always like a weird thing because I felt like it kind of alienated me in some ways from like a lot of like my class, because it's hard to talk about experiences that you're like having with people that just aren't having like these similar experiences and don't understand, right? Professional wrestling is definitely an odd career choice to go into. But it's an awesome one too. But it's very hard to talk about things that relate with people your age whenever they're off doing other things that like normal teenagers would be doing. So it was definitely a challenge, but I'm very thankful that like I had that experience because professional wrestling like really helped me grow up in a lot of ways, and taught me a lot of my social skills.
Very early in your career, you and your grandpa founded TW Chattanooga. How did the idea to establish a new promotion started, and how was the experience of building up a new promotion?
Yeah. So this was actually an interesting one. So I had mentioned prior that I was training in Ringgold, Georgia at this local promotion around there, which Ringgold, Georgia is like right on the outskirts of Chattanooga. I was living in Soddy Daisy, Tennessee at the time. So I was making it's probably like an hour drive to training and whatnot every week, but not important. What's important, during that time period, my grandfather was concocting this grand idea based on what he was seeing out of the scene that we had at the time in Chattanooga, because it was kind of a barren land around here, and like that sucked because Chattanooga has such a rich wrestling history. And if that's something that you're unfamiliar with, like please go check it out because there's some really cool stuff that you can find out about our territory. So while I was training, my old man was seeing kind of like what the scene was like, and he just like he didn't like what he saw, and he felt like a lot of the young guys just weren't getting the proper opportunities to grow and learn, even based off of my training experiences breaking in, because it wasn't right. How I was originally trained was not correct, I will say. So he basically had the idea to start a wrestling show and place to train, so that way younger guys could have the proper like opportunity to do so. And he was kind of like figuring it out. God bless him. He's a doer, but he was like figuring it out as he went, because he never had any prior experience in the pro wrestling business. I mean, the man is an electrical contractor and, has had all sorts of different odd jobs his whole life. Like, I definitely got my work ethic from him. But so one day after school, it was like in April or May, he took me to this building. And of course, I thought it was just maybe a job he was working on or something. Cause like sometimes I would go with him to the jobs and whatnot after school and just kind of hang out with him at work. And he took us to this building, and I was like, hey, like, what are we doing here? And he was like, this is going to be where we have wrestling. I go, what? He goes, I think that it's time that we start a show and we give the area a place for people like you to be able to grow and do it proper. And it scared me because, I didn't want to catch heat with a lot of the, veterans and people around the area, which I did. And I would initially gain the respect in the later years. But I was very much worried about the idea of it being, oh, well, Granddaddy started him a show so that way he could be the star, which was never the case. And that was often the story that was kind of like coded around, but it wasn't true. My old man wanted to make a difference in the scene. And from then on, we started TWE. I didn't take over business operations officially until probably about 5 or 6 years ago, which I was still relatively young then. But, we were just playing it by ear, my old man was. And it took us a long time to get to where we are now, as far as like the experience we've gained and the people that help us run the company, because it takes more than just one person to make things work. But since taking over the company, I'm very blessed in saying that like I've got a great team with me, with Dylan Hills and Reverend Dan Wilson, and the veterans that we have now at the show are incredible, like in Tank and Derek Neal and so many other talented individuals we have. Like, I'm very blessed to look back on where we were to what we are now, because by no means were we a show that should have made it to this point, but we have. And it's been a very DIY way of doing it, but we did it. And that's initially how TWE was started.
At the 16 Karat Gold weekend this year, you sold a best of DVD of your career so far. And I'm just wondering, how did this happen that you got your own best of DVD, especially in these times where streaming is the number one and DVD is more like a niche product for the collectors?
Yeah. So I thought back to whenever I was first getting into the independents, and I remember seeing best of DVDs, and I always thought it was like so cool. So of course, Smart Mark Video still makes like wrestling DVDs, and I'm pretty sure there's another distributor I can't think of, but I ended up actually doing this solo. It was just an idea I had, and I was like, you know what, we're going to try it. We're going to see what happens. So I hit up a friend of mine who I knew did DVDs, and I was like, hey, this is going to be really weird, but if you could think of some of the best matches I've had in my career, what would you say they were? And like, we talked about it, and he goes, okay, why do you ask? I was like, well, I don't know. I'm just playing around with the idea of maybe making a best of. And he instantly got on it. And then he sent me the artwork for the DVD. It was like, hey, this is like what I'm thinking. Make it look like an old ROH DVD. And it's like, yeah, cool. Because that was like a lot of the influence for the things I like. So it was very much a DIY project that I thought to myself would be interesting solely for the fact of it's such a niche thing. And it would just be a unique offering to have on the merch table. I'm a huge mark for DVDs and whatnot. So it's a very cool thing that I'm glad I ended up going through with.
Yeah, absolutely. I bought the DVD from you, and I started watching US Indie Wrestling in 2001, so I grew up with DVDs and tapes. So it was very cool for me as a collector as well.
That's so sick. I love hearing that. Do you remember what the first wrestling DVD you bought was, or tape traded?
Tape trading was CCW Best of the Best, the first one.
Wow, that's crazy. Who's the winner of that one?
Who was the winner? I only remember because the Briscoes had a fantastic match at the show.
We talked about TWE being a promotion, and you're also the head trainer of the TWE Performance Combine. How would you describe the difference between being a wrestler and being a trainer, and maybe also what is similar?
Yeah, so basically, I guess I can kind of start from where I started as a trainer. By no means was it something that like I wanted to do, in the regard of like, yeah, like I think I'm qualified to train people, because like to me it just felt very odd. But we had someone that was there originally training people who just kind of left abruptly and left like a group of people there with just nobody. And I was like, there every week training anyways and like being in the ring. So I was kind of thrusted into the role of trainer like that. And that first class was Aaron Wade. And Wade, I would say, is very much who I would credit as like my first student. And he's done pretty well for himself, I would say. But it's very much a weird thing for me in the regard of the differences of being a performer and being a trainer. Sometimes I get more fulfillment out of seeing things that my kids do, the things that I do, because it's like so cool knowing that you played a part in someone else's like story, right? And like, don't get me wrong, like I still obviously have a lot of chapters left in my story to write, but the fact that I'm able to also help be a part of someone else's and like be there to help teach them something that maybe I wasn't taught early on in where they are in their career to where I was in my career. Like essentially I just want to be the trainer that I wished I had when I first started. And as long as I can be that and continue to make a difference and produce talented, like individuals, like that's all I want to do, as far as like the training aspect goes. And I seem to get a relatively decent reputation as a trainer, which is nice because, like I said, who am I to be doing it? But I was recently reached out to by a company in Italy about doing a seminar. And, I even ran like a class a few times whenever I was over in England for PCW and whatnot. So, it's very nice to be able to be regarded in some highness, I guess, of like being like a teacher. So I very much enjoy it a lot.
How would you describe the philosophy of you as a coach and maybe also of a TWE in general, and maybe even also your partner promotions like SCI or Action Wrestling?
Yeah, no, that's a great question, actually. Basically, like, the big values that I have, as Sebastian, TWE is a very accepting and loving place. So I basically want to impart that as my values of like, just be a good person and things will work themselves out. Whenever you like, from the training aspect of things, like whenever you first start, you're not going to be great. There's very few in between that do turn out great as soon as they start, right? Those are kind of like your unpaid intern years. You're trying to get experience and gain and earn value. But as long as you're a good person and you put in the work, things work out. And that's the big thing that I really try to impart on my students: be accepting, love everybody. Don't do bad business, be a good person, and it all works out. And that's kind of like my philosophy, even with like promoting TWE, like working with local businesses and like partner promotions, like with Action Wrestling, SCI, ICW. Like, I've done more business by just being a good person than by being a good wrestler, if that makes sense. So that at the end of the day is always going to be my philosophy. Love everyone, be accepting, be a good person.
Following up on the last question, also on the philosophy, on January 13th, TWE made history when Eden Monroe became the first non-binary champion in TWE, and I think also in the history of Tennessee. On that show, someone who made transphobic remarks towards Eden was shut down by wrestlers and fans. What are your thoughts on this, and how did you see the situation?
So I wasn't in the building at the moment of when it had happened, but it speaks volumes to the people that we have on our roster to have instantly caught it. Of course, I caught the tail end of it, but it was something that was handled swiftly and quickly, and we got that person out. And to me, I was proud of that because I don't want somebody's money that is going to come in there and make hateful remarks and comments. Like, we love everybody at TWE. Everybody should love everybody. You should have respect for who someone is. And if you don't have that respect, if you don't have that love, I don't really care to have your business. We want to have a positive environment, and like to have something so negative like that happen. Like, I hate that did happen, but in a way, I'm glad that the fans got to see all of us band together and get rid of the problem like that, because that shows that there is safety and that we are very much what we talk about. So that's how I feel about it. I was just so proud of my team for handling it as quick as they did. And I'm proud of Eden because they're out here absolutely killing it. So definitely did not stifle them by any means.
Something that TWW also stands for are the crash course shows. And not that long ago, a new format had its debut on YouTube with TWE Crash Course Control Center. What can you tell us about this?
Yeah, so the Crash Course Control Center idea was actually Rob Weathers' pitch. Rob is someone who came on board with our team. You've heard probably some of his commentary through New South, through TWE, through Southern States Pro, and a couple of other plethora of promotions. But normally he works a lot with Carmen Michaels, who's also a driving force for a lot of the ideas that go into Crash Course. But yeah, so basically the idea was we want to get more eyes on what we're doing on Monday nights. And that was kind of like an idea, because we obviously don't want to put out all of the shows, because the beauty of Crash Course is you have to be there to watch it. And it also kind of gives a safety net in the regard of it's not being live streamed. It's okay to make mistakes. You don't have to worry about the whole world seeing it. But we're also telling some really interesting stories. So that's kind of like the happy medium of us being able to like show what we're doing, but also still keep the privacy for the performers to learn and grow.
Of course, you're not only a trainer and a promoter and everything, but you are, of course, also a wrestler yourself. And as such, you had a very eventful and busy year. Last year at the Scenic City Invitational, you had a very physical match against Suge D. What are your thoughts on this match, and maybe also on the whole feud with Suge D in general?
Oh, Suge, piece of shit. But that match was what it was. It was physical. It was tough. In a lot of ways, I thought it was maybe going to be the culmination of this anything you can do, I can do better feud that we had, but it was not. He cost me the chance to move on and potentially become the second or the first ever 2-time Scenic City Invitational winner. And that really hurt, you know. So like followed by after that, you know, I would break my jaw, all these different things would happen. And then whenever I came back, Suge D was taking out people that I cared about. So of course sights were set on him, because I had a lot of time to think about it, especially whenever I broke my jaw and was laid up in a bed. It was not fun. But all I could think about was getting my hands on Suge. So whenever I had the chance to, I took it. Obviously, I came back a little bit more different than I was before I left Number One No More. I am now the moral compass of professional wrestling, 1/4 of the Coven of the Goat. But yeah, the feud with Suge D as a whole, I think, is a very interesting feud, because it has so many twists and turns and things where, honestly, things where you didn't think it would get to, like the barbed wire baptism match that would truly culminate the whole feud, right? Like, by no means did I ever think that was going to be where we went with the feud, but it just is what it is. And it worked, you know, and I think we gave them a really good end to a nearly 2-year feud. So overall, I think the Suge D feud was a lot of fun to be a part of. And, you know, who's to say that it's not over?
You already mentioned that you broke your jaw. Can you explain to our listeners how this impacted your career and maybe also your life?
So in August of last year, I wrestled for PWF in Newport, North Carolina, ran by the Carinos. And I was wrestling a match against Ryan Gallione. I attempted a tope suicida and was cut off with a knee. That knee would be a clean break to my mandible on both sides. With that match, you can actually find it online. I haven't went back and watched it because obviously it's still a little fresh to me. But I would go on to wrestle an extra, like I think it's like 5 or 8 minutes post break, and I knew my jaw was broke at the moment it happened. But I wrestled the match. I went to the hospital. I was in the hospital up there for 8 hours. I didn't get put into a room until 8 hours. And then they told me like, hey, like we may need to keep you. So I said, no, that's not happening. I'll go to the doctor in Chattanooga. So I got my car, drove to Chattanooga, walked right into the hospital. I was like, hey, I think my jaw's broke. And they were like, yeah, no, it definitely is. So I then would get scheduled for surgery 3 days later, and the recovery would start. As far as impacts on my career and impacts on my life, it took 3 or 4 months off of my career, and that was like the most time I've ever taken off in my whole tenure of doing this. So that was very hard on me mentally. I missed the 10-year anniversary of my company. Like I wasn't able to perform. And I remember like I had wrote out something that I wanted to say to the whole roster before the event. And I couldn't even talk because, I had just had the surgery, and like it just hurt so much to like open my mouth or do anything because like I couldn't speak. I just remember like I gave my phone because I typed it all out on my phone. I gave it to Dylan Hells. I just like kind of looked at him and was like, please read this. Like I was just crying because it hurt so bad knowing like I was missing like what I guess would kind of be like the Wrestlemania of TWE. And like with it being the 10-year anniversary, like you don't want to miss that, right? It was the first War Games in that building. It was the first War Games in Chattanooga in like 20 years or something. So it just was a lot. As far as at home, it was really grueling. I was, I was miserable. I was absolutely miserable. And I felt awful for my wife at the time because it was, not easy because I obviously wasn't able to work at my other job. It was taking money away from us, just sitting there. But, it was just kind of one of those things where you just had to trust the process and hope it got better. I definitely dealt with my depression, but the moment that I was like cleared to like just go work out, like you couldn't get me out of the gym. Like I was so zeroed in on coming back to wrestling because I felt like I had lost steam, that I was just zeroed in. So then whenever I came back, it felt like I had a lot to prove. It was kind of like starting back at square one in a way, but then whenever I got in the ring and I felt the energy, like it was kind of like, okay, we're picking up where we left off. There was no steam lost for real here. So that was kind of like what that experience was for me.
Not that long after returning to wrestling, you were part of the Festival, the big indie wrestling festival, which is organized by Beyond Wrestling and always takes place around the end of the year. How was your festival experience?
Yeah, so my festival experience was great. I think that I worked with PWF and ICW. So the PWF event, I wrestled one of my best friends, Colby Carino, who was the current NWA World Junior Heavyweight Champion at the time, for the belt. And, to be able to like wrestle like one of your best friends for like a major championship in professional wrestling, like that was such a great experience. And, Colby and I, like, we have a catalog of matches. You can go find them on IWTV. There's some online for free from where we were like extremely young. Like, so like that match, like really meant a lot to be able to do. But the thing that I think meant the most to me was working with ICW up there in Worcester for the SPO Battle of the Tough Guys tournament. We lost Sean last year, and to be able to like honor him and be a part of like this tournament that was like solely dedicated to him, like really meant a lot to me. And I've now been known to dabble in the deathmatch community, so to go up there and give my all and make it to the finals, and wrestle for the American Deathmatch Championship against Hoodfoot, which absolutely incredible performer. Everybody I wrestled as, Matt Tremont, Matt Mikowski, Brandon Kirk, all those guys, like they're just so incredible. So to have had that experience and to have done it for SPO was just so incredible. And honestly, it was awesome being able to be a fan as well and just watch the other events that were taking place. Like, I got to catch up with old friends like Paul London and so many other people that are up in the Northeast that maybe I don't get to see as often. But overall, Restival was incredible. And I was very happy that I got to be a part of it.
In March of this year, you did a European tour. You first appeared at WXW 60K Gold Weekend, and after that, you referee Shiny Shoes, Jared Diaz, and Osha Edwards were in the UK. What are your thoughts on the trip overall?
It was definitely one of my favorite, or if not my favorite trip I've made over to Europe and England. So I felt like this trip was great in the way of I actually got to like train and do things like that, because I feel like my last few trips I've had over were like just too short. This last trip I spent a month over there, and I was by myself for a good majority of the trip. So it was nice because I was able to go to the WXW Academy, and like I got to attend a class with rotation, and then got to do like a tape study with like Robert, and it was just so awesome to just kind of like see like the similarities but also the differences of the training ran there, because obviously WXW has a great training facility and great training regiments. So it was awesome to see that. And then also with England, being able to go over there and work with the likes of the legendary James Mason, being able to train with Dean Allmark, who is one of my favorite technical wrestlers of all time. It was really incredible. And, there were just so many like things that like I could talk about with it. Like, whether it be getting to work with Axel Tischer at Ambition, getting to wrestle Rotation finally, who was one of the first people in WXW to really like be nice to me. Not that anyone was mean by any means, because everyone's like so incredibly nice, but like, me and Rotation, whenever I first came over, like really hit it off. So it was so awesome to be able to wrestle a friend on a stage like WXW, and then to just go over to England with O'Shea and everybody. Like you couldn't have had a better trip. And I'm just so thankful for the opportunities that I get to go over there and have these experiences and get to share them with my friends.
You talked about being a part of the Ambition tournament for the first time. And in general, what would you say? How did this WXW festival feel different compared to the other two you already were a part of?
It felt like I kind of came in a little bit more established this time. Like, not that there was like a sense of like unpreparedness at all the last two times I was there, but like this time I felt like I really had something to prove. Like I came in, I was like, okay, they know who I am. Now I have to really show them why I'm here, why I keep coming back. Because WXW has been such a goal of mine for years since I first got into the European and UK scene. So, the fact that I've even been able to come back like 3 times, like we've talked about, is like incredible. And I would honestly love to keep coming back because I love that whole crew and I really appreciate the European wrestling scene so much. So it was, very much like, not like a chip on my shoulder situation, but I wanted to very much prove my worth. So whenever I got to then step in the ring with like Axel Tischer in the first round of Ambition, like, who is the guy? Like Axel, y'all know this. Axel Tischer is the man in European wrestling. So to be able to like put myself in a sink or swim scenario, which I tend to thrive well in, it meant a lot to me. And I think I did a fairly good job of showing that I can hang with the best of them. So that was very much how it felt different.
The Festival and the 16 karat gold were the only big weekends, or should I even say weeks, that you were a part of recently, because not that long ago, you were a part of the Wrestlemania week. You wrestled on both H2O shows on this week. You wrestled on A Labor of Love, SHP, WrestleJohn, and also on Action Dean. How was your experience?
Oh my gosh. Sleepless nights. Nothing but sleepless nights. But it was so great to come back to the States and be reunited with Rev, Tank, and everybody. Literally, I had gotten back into the States, and I think I only had like a day or two to sleep in my bed before I went back on the road and was in Philadelphia. So very, very restless. But the whole week itself as a whole was just so much fun, because with WrestleMania weeks and weekends and whatnot, it's kind of like what I talked about with, Restival, where it's like kind of like you've seen all these people you haven't seen in so long, and it's a nice kind of like family reunion type situation. But then you also like look at it and it's a great networking situation too. And you get to like meet and see all these incredible professional wrestlers and pick their brains. And it's a melting pot of like these brilliant minds of the sport. So in that regard, it was just incredible. But from a match perspective, like every match that I had that week was different in the regard of performance, right? Like everything kind of had something different to offer with it and told a story, like being able to tell the story with Kennedy Copeland on both the H2O shows, where it was, I wrestled her on Monday and then left her laying after the match on Monday night. And then Tuesday, she's in the first round of the tournament that I'm in, and I get to be the big bad villain. And it's like, being able to like just do things like that is just so fun, right? And then of course, that's different than what I do Wednesday, which was this crazy 6-man tag with Sean Henderson, the Chad, and Jimmy Lloyd versus me and Fresh Air. And it's like the most oddball pairing, but it just worked, and it was so fun. And then, of course, the Dean show for Action, like one of the arguably best shows, top 3 best shows of that week and weekend. To be able to be a part of that was so special, and like just deliver such like a hard hitting fight. Like, cause that's what it was. It was a fight between like Tank and I versus Manders and Tom Lawler. Like it was just a blast. And I was so thankful to have just done that, because like those are the weekends and weeks like Carrot, Restival, WrestleMania week, like all that makes me feel alive, because I'm constantly working, I'm constantly pushing, I'm doing something to better myself, right? And whenever you're around like-minded people, that like also motivates you to continue and want to do the same thing. Like, what else can you ask for, So yeah, WrestleMania week was incredible. I loved it.
You are very active in the Southeast, of course, in TWE, but also for Action Wrestling, SCI, New South, Retinal, Southern Honor, and also outside of the Southeast for promotions like H2O or ICW No Holds Barred. What would you say is your home promotion in the Southeast, aside from TWE? And what is like your home promotion outside of the Southeast?
That's a great question. So I would very much consider Action Wrestling my home outside of home. I've spent a lot of time with Matt Griffin in Action. Shout out to him. They just celebrated their, I believe, 5-year anniversary, 5 or 6 year anniversary. And I've basically been there with them since the beginning. So I would very much consider them my home. We've been all over, from Tyrone to all the little towns in Georgia to Tampa, Florida for Mania Week. I was there for whenever they were represented at the Collective a couple years ago in 2019. So I definitely would consider action wrestling my home away from home in the Southeast. As far as out of the South, though, I've done a lot of work with H2O and ICW. So because I would say H2O is very much firmly planted where they are, I would say they're kind of like my third home away from home, because quite simply, the H2O Wrestling Center reminds me so much of the TWE. And that's always the one thing that fans tell me whenever they've gotten to both, is they're like, oh, it reminds me of the TWW Arena. Oh, it reminds me of H2O. You know what I mean? So that would be my answer for that. H2O and action wrestling.
ICW No Holds Barred, that you already mentioned, over the last years has run shows in the TWW Arena regularly. And how did this start, and how important are these shows for you and TWE in general?
Well, I think the importance of ICW running in the TWE Arena is it offers a different brand of professional wrestling, or a different flavor, I should say, to Scenic City. And that alone is great. I love to be able to offer variety. And whenever we had initially struck up the deal for ICW to come to Chattanooga, a lot of that was actually kind of done through Dan Wilson, the rep. He had put Danny DeMano into contact with me, and we had kind of from there sat down and had talked. I think the initial conversation that we had was the Chattanooga Summit, I guess, kind of was had, where it was myself, Dylan Hells, Rev, and then I think we had Danny on a call. I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure that was what it was. And we kind of laid out what we were going to do. Because the first weekend we had, so the pit, it wasn't the pit fighter that we did the first time. It was just the pit. We had that at TWE, and then we had No Holds Barred with the chains at Inversions, which is an aerial silks and yoga venue. I don't even know how we came across getting that, but somehow that was the venue for a deathmatch show. And that was the first weekend, and it went so well, and our crews just meshed pretty good together. So it became a constant thing, and they've kept coming back. They've brought good business to TWE as far as bringing just a variety show for us. So very glad that we've got to do that with ICW.
At the last ICW No Holds Barred shows in the TWE Arena, you faced Aaron Wade, and on the second day, Cruel for the Independent Wrestling World Championship. What are your thoughts on these matches?
Aaron Wade, both were fights, especially the one with Wade. It was just trainer versus student. It was rival versus rival. And if you go and watch it, by no means is it a technical classic. It is just two people that do not like each other beating the absolute shit out of each other. And for the sake of violence, I would recommend watching it for that. But originally that night I was supposed to face Cruel. Cruel for some reason was not able to make it. And then I think that was whenever the match got switched to Saturday, because I was originally supposed to wrestle Danny DeMano. So the fight with Cruel was a fight for survival. But also it was, I believe, my third or fourth time ever challenging for the IWTV World Championship. So I felt like I had a lot to prove. And, obviously it's hard to get a lot of words from Cruel, but I would like to think that I earned his respect. And let's be real, I'm not happy with the outcome of the match. There was no finish. Cruel did not pin me. He didn't beat me. And I think that maybe calls for an IWTV championship rematch. So if you go back and watch that one, It was an absolute fight, ended in absolute chaos. But it's definitely not the last time you're going to see me standing across the ring from Cruel.
Before Marvel will talk to you about what is next for you, your last match before this interview was at Action Wrestling when you defeated the Action Tag Team Championships alongside Matt Sales, or you competed for the championships alongside Matt Sales against The Good Hand, Suge D, and Kevin Ryan. How do you feel about this?
My gear bag's lighter. I'm not happy that we walked away without the championships. I very much didn't want Suge D to have anything, and yet he left with something. And it wasn't just the Action Wrestling tag titles; it was Matt Sales' hair. And I respect Matt for what he did. He was valiant in the way of he didn't want to see me get severely hurt and whatnot, but also I'm a fighter. I was willing to die on my sword, and he threw in the towel. So overall, I think it's definitely a match worth going back and watching because it's a very violent match. And I think it was it's a fun one to go watch in that regard. But overall, not happy with the results of the match. But, we regroup, we move on. I can't say that I will be teaming with Matt Sells anymore, per se. But whatever, we do in Action Wrestling next, hopefully it's nothing but big things.
What are your and maybe also Dylan Hales and everyone involved at TWE goals for the TWE Combine Center and TWE in general for the future?
The big one is obviously to continue growing the brand and making it more recognizable, on a large level. But with that as well, I want to be able to branch out and work more with local businesses and be able to kind of do more for the community with TWE as well. We've done things like appeared in parades, worked with Red Bank, the city of Red Bank for the Red Bank Jubilee, which is our big Red Bank Day thing that we do here. But those I'd say would be my goals. Obviously, to continue putting on inclusive, action-packed professional wrestling events and just kind of stay in the course. We want to grow our attendance, and we've been doing that with each show more and more and more. So it would be nice to be able to one day maybe move the TWW Arena. So right now, those would be the goals I would say for TWE itself. For the Performance Combine, keep training like-minded individuals and people that want to be the best they can potentially be in professional wrestling, and just continue growing the scene here, and just put out some really talented wrestlers. That's my goal there.
Do you also have goals you want to accomplish for wrestling in the Southeast as a whole, maybe together with people like Matt Griffin or Scott Hensley?
So I can't really speak for them, but really it would just be that in general. Just continue putting respect on Southeastern wrestling and showing that we are truly a hotbed right now, with TWE, with SCI, with Action Wrestling. We just want to prove that we're here and we're here to stay. And we're Southeast first. Simple as that. We are the Southeast first.
After having been in Germany, the UK, different territories in the US, do you want to wrestle on the East Coast in Mexico, Japan, or maybe even Australia in the future?
Absolutely. I want to wrestle everywhere. The West Coast would be my next goal because I've not had a chance to touch over there yet. Very much want to wrestle in Japan, Mexico, everywhere in Europe. There's just so many places that I want to see, and so many fans that I want to meet, and so many opponents that I want to wrestle. That it's gonna take some time, but we're gonna do it. So very much that would be some of my goals would be to continue international travel and growing my brand in that regard, but also I'll just go ahead and say, I'm not sure if this was a question that y'all were going to have, but personal goals for me are I would like to potentially work towards working on national television and maybe a WWE tryout. That's a big goal for me. So right now, we're just putting in the work and just doing what we can to maximize every opportunity.
Do you have a dream match against a certain opponent you would like to have?
I was thinking about this earlier today. Currently, as far as dream matches go, the people that I would like to face, and he will be available in July, from what I've read. I would really love the opportunity to wrestle Trevor Lee. Trevor Lee is somebody that I've kind of been compared to over the years, and I caught him right as he was leaving the Independents whenever we were on a show together for CWF Mid-Atlantic. Somebody I've very much looked up to and would love to mix it up with and test myself against. As far as other dream matches I would like to have, I would say Lee Moriarty and Wheeler Yuta. I want to wrestle the absolute best technical wrestlers in the world. So, and also Tracy Williams. I'll say him too. Like I just want to wrestle the best technical wrestlers in the world, test myself, and see what I've got.
Okay, Jaden, that's it. We are at the end of the interview. And as always, the stage is yours. You can plug and promote anything you want.
All right. Well, oh man, ain't going to be no holding my breath on this one. Let's go. So you can find me on social media. I'm on Twitter, Jaden for real. That's Jaden 4 real. You can follow me on Instagram, Jaden1 Newman, Jaden 1 Newman. I am not the female basketball player. I am the professional wrestler, Jaden Newman. So if you've come across a female basketball player, you have clicked on the wrong account. You can also find my merch at prowrestlingtees.com/Jaden Newman, as well as JadenNewmanMerch.com. You can continue to follow my career through there. You can also, if you'd like, follow TWE Chattanooga. That would be very incredible. We have a new Facebook page, TWE Space Chattanooga. You can follow us on Instagram at TWE Chattanooga _ and Twitter, TWE Chattanooga _ and Instagram, TWE Chattanooga. As far as that goes, you can keep an eye out on social media for all upcoming events. And of course, if you ever have any questions or would like to have me for podcasts, interviews, whatever, I may start accepting more of those. So you can thank Sebastian for opening me up to do it. You can email jnewmanbookings at gmail.com. Let's talk. Let's get to work. Keep me busy.
Okay, Jaden, thank you very much for coming on the show. Sebastian and I, we are the TWE Fan Club Germany. We love TWE, and it was just an honor to have you on our podcast. And it was also great for me to meet you in person at the 16 Karat Go tournament.
No, it was a pleasure to meet you as well. And honestly, it was so much fun to be on here. Thank you guys for your time. Thank you for allowing me to just spew all sorts of words that somewhat make sense. It was a pleasure. Thank you guys so much.
And a big thank you also from me, of course, to you, as always, Monroe, and to you, Florian, but especially to you, Jaden. And to be honest, you are one of the reasons why this podcast started. I still remember talking to you about it at the SCI last year. And without the support of people like you and Matt Griffin, this wouldn't have been possible. And therefore, thank you very much for everything. Thank you very much for taking the time to be our guest today. And thank you to all our listeners. And I hope you will listen to us in the future again. Goodbye.